This is the official Astrology Exchange with Monte Farber and William Stickevers, and we will go through what has been going on in the skies and talk about all the different subjects that have been coalescing and converging as we go through this global reset that is already underway. All right, so let's get into this. So I'm going to let you start off with this. I mean, there's been a lot going on. There's a lot of people out there that have been asking us to speak again and start talking on a regular basis and do this astrology exchange at least on a monthly basis to really sort of have a upfront, no holds barred view of what's happening in the world and how it's relating to the astrology and what people are going through as this crisis continues to unfold in so many different ways.
Well, I loved your webinar the other day. What was it? The 19th, was it? September 19th?
Yeah.
Where you were telling everybody about how it is transformation and the societal collapse is transformation, because you're 100% right with that. And that's when I realized that you're the drill sergeant and I'm the sort of spiritual psychologist that gets them after they've been out on the field with you drilling all day.
Right. Right.
It is frightening to people in the sense that if you haven't prepared, it's going to frighten you. And if you don't really want to know what's going on, I mean, but if we had told people what today was like 20 years ago, that would have frightened them. And yet here we are, we're all living through it. We're all dealing with it. And the only thing that can help you is creativity and spirituality.
Right. And that's the most important thing, to emphasize the spiritual dimension and dynamic that's underpinning this entire process.
Yes, and you kept coming back to that on the webinar, which was so good. And you also alluded to the fact that time has speeded up. And I'm 70 now, and time really has speeded up. Things used to, people remember their childhood and things were slow and the whole day. Well, life was like that until the computer and then the internet and then social media. Just watching that thing on Netflix about social media, about how they manipulate people. As somebody who's resisted manipulation my whole life, because I realized the advertisers were trying to do that when they were trying to sell you Ipana toothpaste with these really catchy jingles, which I'll probably remember when I have music's the last thing to go.
Right.
And now they're doing it, but the trouble is they're doing it to kids, and the suicide rate for children, especially young women, is like 139% increases for, younger people need to be prepared spiritually, or else they can't handle the technological advances that adults can barely handle. I guess that's
Right.
that's.
Yeah, I
Look,
mean,
looking at what you posted, look at that. I mean, there's the deep state in the 12th house. We're talking about financial the second house, about being a spiritual person, Neptune in the first house, and having fun with your partner, Venus on the 7th.
well, I just think the fact that we see that loaded 12th house, especially with the moon in Capricorn, and it's very telling to me that this is it certainly signals a period of underlying tectonic plates of transformational forces that are
Yes.
constellating to bring significant and permanent changes in life. And this is going to be playing out all the way into the summer. Well, it'll be playing out for the next several years, but between now and the winter solstice, right, when we have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction,
Oh
when
my
you'll
God.
see these two conjunct, tells me there's going to be some very powerful changes, and that goes beyond just the U.S. presidential election.
Of course, no matter who wins, there's going to be a financial reset. Yeah, that graph you posted at the beginning of your global transformational astrology webinar, the most recent one, showing all the waves meeting, and especially around the 21st, that first graph.
You mean this one here?
Really do. I mean,
right.
you don't need to know astrology to know what that means. You can they intersect between December and January, there's that, you know, it even looks like a grand sextile almost, but it's not.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. We see the convergence of all these different planetary waves.
Yes.
And I mean, and also look, if you look at the November election, the Jupiter Pluto conjunction is going to peak a few days following that. So that is going to be um, the most defining out of planetary tenor. I mean, they're all, and then that wave function continues until it intersects with the Jupiter Saturn, the Mars Pluto, the Mars Saturn, the Jupiter Uranus, and the Saturn Uranus, along with the Mars Uranus wave function. So the Jupiter Pluto sets off ultimately where things are heading, and it just so happens that the Jupiter Pluto conjunction is on the heliocentric north node of Saturn and the heliocentric south node of Pluto.
That's
So
amazing.
it's a triple whammy.
Yeah. And you know, the Gauquelins, when they did their research trying to disprove astrology, they found that Jupiter on the angles was indicated in the charts of actors and politicians. So there you have Jupiter and Pluto, powerful actors, powerful politicians,
Right.
and transformative. Getting back to the word,
Mm-hmm.
I,
I
I
mean,
mean,
you could also look at Jupiter as the judicial system, the judges, and Pluto, the supreme power of the judicial system. And so the Supreme Court nomination, the
right,
Supreme Court factor that will play in this upcoming political power struggle that is unfolding at a titanic scale.
that sure looks Titanic. It looks like the Titanic hit. You know,
Right. This might be the iceberg, right? Right here, the Jupiter Pluto, and then bang, right into the abyss.
I was just like, oh my God, look at, you know it's going on, but when you see it presented so beautifully, it's just like, it's undeniable.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's just, to me, I tell people that life is going to speed up and intensify. And when, we were talking about how life is speeding up, but it's going to intensify and speed up even more so than it has up to this point, because both internal as well as external factors are going to increase in intensity, and it's going to challenge everyone's bias, everyone's level of cognitive bias or cognitive dissonance. And that's like the core of what I've been driving and propounding, because it's in moments of transformation that shatters our false, outdated belief systems, that what is called, or what has been called in psychological financial parlance, as cognitive dissonance,
Right, we're
where
just,
you don't want to believe the evidence that's right in front of you. And it requires some type of internal paradigm shift that requires a breakdown of prior belief systems, because of events occurring with a certain level of intensity and speed that you're having difficulty handling and processing.
yeah, well, that's what I mean. You are the drill sergeant. You're telling them this is not a joke. This is not a drill. This is your life. And unless you handle it as a creative person, one of the things I really love when you were talking about how people who thought, you'll get the college degree and you have the house with the white picket fence and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like I've prepared for this my whole life because we're coming out of the Piscean age, which I like to think of as the Piscean Virgo polarity, going into the Leo Aquarius polarity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And in the Aquarian Leo polarity, it's everyone is a star. It's all about humanity. This has been going on for a while because we had friends who started a big website called iVillage. And when we talked to them about asking some of the people we knew who were quite famous, and wanted to get into this, this web thing, because at the time it was early days. And the owners of iVillage came back and said, the people that we poll do not want celebrities. They want to be the celebrity. That's the Aquarius Leo polarity. So everyone now with technology has the ability to be a king of their and queen of their own domain. That's where
Right.
they have, like what you were saying about the only way to deal with this is to learn how to fix things. Things will, and to live with less money. I love the counters that you had at the end of that
Hmm.
listing, that book.
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, certainly what we're seeing now is we're on the tail end of the Uranus-Pluto square alignment. If you use that 10-degree orb, which is
That,
what mundane astrologers have been using for over 100 years, and you just apply it and plug in the list of events that have correlated with the with the planetary phase period, then you can see, you know, and I only listed it out here to 2019. I can't even, so many things have occurred in 2020, right? We're at the tail end of the wave function. You know, I can't even, we don't have room to list it. It's just unbelievable. And it's, and then it's also, while all of that is happening, right? Uh, well, before I go into what all of that is happening, during the time that occurred, what happened? We were at the time of the peak period of the Uranus Pluto. We had the Mayan calendar,
right.
right? We had the Mayan calendar in 2012 that correlated with this period right here,
Yeah,
right here.
I wanted to point out something about the Mayan calendar. Can you put that back on?
Sure.
Um, Check this out. So you got Jupiter on the ninth degree of Gemini. You have Pluto on the ninth degree of Capricorn, and you have Saturn on the ninth degree of Scorpio, doing a yod, finger of God.
Yeah.
You know, all
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah.
The canary in the coal mine, saying these three planets are going to figure really prominently in
Mm-hmm.
your future. And now here they are, all mashed up in Capricorn, kicking our ass. And but the Mayans were amazing. I was actually at Chichen Itza
Really?
yeah, the Mexican government has never allowed the Mayans to do rituals there, and they finally did. I mean, we had
Mm-hmm.
police there and everything. God knows why. I have no idea. But my father was a cop, and I could smell the gun oil on all these guys with the shirts loosely
Right. Sure.
plainclothes Mexican cops around, and this man named Mayan Elder Hunbat's Men, who was the real deal, and I saw him do miracles actually.
Mm-hmm.
He such a humble man, such an amazing man. And I asked him, we had done a talking board called the Pathfinder, and I asked him if he would endorse it so we wouldn't run into cultural appropriation accusations. And he said, yes, we have to do this. We have to get this out there because we have to make thousands of shamans now. We're entering sacred times. And that's what this whole COVID, making all of us monastic, monks in the Himalayan caves where we were all isolated for all these months. You can look at it as a prison, or you can look at it as an excuse to really do all the things that you know you should be doing, like meditate, strengthen your body, get your immune system going. It's Big Brother's not going to help you. Big Brother's trying to manipulate your information, but Big Brother's not going to save any of us.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and one of the things I see here with this configuration is the fact that there was a Sun-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn at the time when the Sun conjunct it basically conjunct, it was on the world point. It was at the solstice world point, conjunct the galactic ecliptic, right? So it was where the ecliptic and the galactic equator intersected at the world point, and Pluto was the closest. I guess I would, yeah, from what I'm seeing here, it's certainly the closest aspect to the sun. So so what I'm seeing here is certainly, I mean, that's transformational in itself. It certainly implies an aspect of or uh, a dimension of maturity, like a collective spiritual maturation process that
Because,
would invoke transformation. Pluto,
right, and think
Pluto,
of the
transformation.
Capricorn. I mean, it's a mountain goat with a fish's tail. It shows the strong spiritual and emotional and psychic needs of the Capricorns. They're always thought of as the business people, but that tail represents the strong spiritual grounding that in the book of Tao it says one who would lead must follow all. So if you're going to be an authority, you have to be doing it in such a way that you're doing it to help people, or else it's not going to
Hmm.
stand. And that's why the old ways aren't working anymore. People see through it. Everyone's too smart now.
Hmm. And the Mayans talked about this quite a bit. I'm sure you heard this from the Mayan elders that according to the according to the Mayan astrological, mystical, astrological, cosmological tradition, and to the prophecy, that during this period there would be energy particles, or cool as they call it, from the heart of the Milky Way galaxy that would be beamed down and would interact with the sun or beam to the sun, right? The sun would act as a proxy that would then beam directly to the earth as a form of transmission, invoking a process of transformation, and that being destruction of the old epoch and the transformation and birth of a new one, or a new world order. Not the world order, a new world order for mankind.
Right. And when I asked Hunbot's men, why did the Mayans leave? Because you're down there in the Yucatan, and there's cities underneath, overgrowth, miles and miles of raised walkways. And he said the energy left, we left too. It
Right,
was just a question of an energy shift. They knew that certain things just ended.
right.
This is something, you were talking about the people with the stock market, when the thing is going to go back to normal. So sometimes don't go back to normal.
Yeah, right,
You just don't.
right. Now it's not going to go back to normal. That's what I was trying to emphasize about transformation, is that events would transpire and have been transpiring since 2012 that would challenge the false belief systems that were limiting the growth of our civilization, the development of humanity, and um, that would see, basically, ultimately, what it's coming down to is a complete loss of confidence and faith and trust in religion, formal religion, government institutions that have provided the answers, science that have provided the guidance, uh, um, the spiritual institutions that provided us a sense of meaning, right, to our own personal lives. Those are going through a death rebirth process in themselves, and that's part of why all this chaos is going on, and all this, what we have is symptoms of a breakdown and chaotic process which occurs just prior to a death rebirth event.
Right. And I've been telling my friends, who I have friends who are in the media, and I've been saying, you can't just, they have TV shows. And I said, you just can't come in with a garbage truck and dump a garbage truck's load of garbage in our living room every day without telling us what we can do about it. And I look
Right,
around at all the riots
right,
and people doing stuff I don't agree with, and I don't agree with violence and all this, but I can understand they just got tired of, what can we do? What can we do? They're trying to do something. I think if leaders really want to lead, they got to give people something to do, because if we depend on them to do something, they don't. Look what's going on in Washington. All they do is posture. They don't legislate. There hasn't been any legislation coming out of Washington for a while. They're in
right,
gridlock.
right. So the problem is that the issues we've been these intractable problems are not just political. They're social, they're structural, they're financial, they so we're seeing a collapse of all those different things. And so everything is symptomatic of this collapse. Everything, right? It's not just I mean, first you see what? Financial collapse, which is often, right, which is what we saw. We saw a near financial collapse of the system. They propped it up, propped it up, propped it up. They're saying, hey, everything is fine. And yeah, the last time they did that back in 1930, when they said, we're out of it, there's going to be no depression, the next day, boom, the stock market began to dive and went down 80 some odd percent. We're following that same trajectory now. That's followed by a collapse in consumption, which would be considered commercial collapse, right? Nobody's going to movie theaters, nobody's going out to restaurants, right? We're seeing commercial collapse where people go to the store and they can't get their bread, they can't get their toilet paper, right? They,
Pluto
you
is
know,
well,
right? And then that's followed by a social collapse where there's less cohesion in society. People are not celebrating Christmas. They're not celebrating Thanksgiving. They don't, they're not doing traditional. I mean, forget July, July 4th, that was a dud. So what we're seeing is a break, and then that's followed later on by cultural collapse.
no,
And but the political collapse that we see that often follows the collapse of the financial system or the breakdown of the financial system is when you find mayors not listening to governors and governors not listening to presidents and people, acting like loose cannons, like AOC and the rest of them, right? Who are not there. There is no, this the civil unrest at the societal level is just reflective of the level of political dissension and enmity that is playing out not just between two parties, but it's actually playing out between the actual hierarchical structure of government, where the where the propagation of authority is beginning to break down.
I'm sure it's like you said AOC. She doesn't listen to what Nancy Pelosi says. She's taking her position as the leader of the Democratic Party. But you're right,
That's
it's
right.
politics. And there's also the spiritual aspect of things, which is where I've tried to come in, trying to get people who are basically interested in astrology or tarot or all the other metaphysical things that have helped Amy and me in our life, and try and do it in a beautiful way. That's the kind of stuff you got to use to feed your soul in a dark time, because what can you do when you don't know what's coming at you? All you can do is the first rule of warfare, which is make your base secure, and that means making yourself physically fit and improving your center, getting in touch with your hara, and because then things can get thrown at you and you'll deal with them, and to approach things in a creative way. That's why we did the creativity oracle, which is doing great. I'm glad to say things are good. I mean, for us, things are great because people.
That's good to hear.
Well, people turn to the people. What is it? Raja Yoga says we pray to the Almighty when we get stuck, and people
Hmm.
are stuck now, and they want to know what's going on. But the thing is, they know what's going on, and that's why they get mad when you tell them what's going on, because what you say does resonate with people.
Right. Well, I get told by many of the astrologers, you're not doing real astrology. Real astrology, you wouldn't be addressing these issues, William. Right. So,
Again, if you were the court astrologer, you would be beheaded back in the day if you
right.
those issues. You want to know what's going on. The trouble is people ask questions they don't really want to know the answer.
You don't want to know the answer because it's not so much, it's not what's in the answer, it's what the answer represent, that their worldview is no longer, is antiquated, essentially. It's no longer relevant to the world we're moving towards.
Well, plus it's like you're dealing with addicts and you're telling them, guess what, addicts, you got to stop being an addict. And then
Right.
when you're dealing with someone who's like a drunk, the alcohol's talking to you, talking back. No, I'm not a drunk, or no, I don't have to stop. I can have a few.
Right.
it,
Right.
you're dealing with people who are addicted to things being a
Right.
certain way.
Right.
They're not going
Right.
to go gently into the night, right?
Right. So, I mean, look, everything is just symptomatic of what's been going on for a long time. A lot of people think, well, this is all Trump's fault until, everything was fine until Trump came along. But the reality is that we've seen a breakdown of things happening day in, day out, and it was a lot of damage control and cover up and posturing going on, what I call extend and pretend. And one of the things I addressed in September 2019 was, which, just a year ago, was the fact that the damage control and the extend and pretend posturing was starting to fail and would fail completely by the time we would get into the triple alignment, certainly in the second half of 2020. And that has become
Yeah.
really clear, especially when the Princeton study came out finding that the BLM was responsible for 91% of the riots over the last 3 months. And it's continuing to accelerate and intensify.
Right. I mean, to to blame anyone who blames other people. What do they say? Excuses are the leading post of losers. And didn't a famous coach
Right.
say? Yeah, you got to be strong. You got to be brave. I mean, you're an Aries, so it comes naturally to you. You're learning all about how to be brave. Um, I think that that's what this time is all about. Is helping us all. It's like the future wasn't coming fast enough, and all of a sudden we went out of neutral into third gear, and
Right.
there's a lot of grinding going on right now, you know. But I think we
Right.
come out of it in a way that you know, the future will be chugging along in a different way. I do not know what's going to happen to stores because they're just all going down, and the restaurants.
Mhm. Right.
I
Well, that's
feel
part of the commercial collapse.
yeah,
Remember, I talked about the fact that we saw a retail apocalypse, and it's not just the fact that a bunch of stores are being. We're talking about Lord and Taylor. You're talking about Macy's. You're talking about stores that have defined our culture. Our
right.
culture since it's certainly since the entire 20th century, during the entire second and third industrial revolution, right? We're
Plus,
now going into our fourth, but we're talking about a massive collapse that just goes beyond just retail, right?
yeah, because each one of those companies represents a supply chain, and all along the supply chain. But the worst part is that people are afraid of other people. Someone gets too close to you, you start thinking, "Oh my God, are they going to give me this disease?"
Right,
And
right,
it's unfortunately killed so many people. You know, people say, "Well, it's comorbidity." So what? The person's dead. No, this person has people that love them, and they were a nice person that didn't deserve to die from getting an illness. Um, but you know, what can you? At a certain point, it's making all of us a little not selfish, but self-involved in the sense that we have to protect ourselves because government's not protecting us. The stores we can't depend on the supply chains. It's really making every person have to be dependent on themselves. Like in that list that you put up about how to deal with all the different different collapses. I hope it doesn't get to the point where you have roving bands and ethnic cleansing. It has
well,
happened in other
yeah,
places. Casa,
right.
Casa. Did you ever see the video that's on the internet somewhere from that woman who survived that? And she talks about, you know, what happens when this happens. And she talked about that. All of a sudden, the neighborhood started to organize to keep strangers out.
Right. Well,
That's
that's part of the societal collapse scenario that I talked about. The five, so you have the financial collapse, political collapse, commercial collapse, social collapse, cultural collapse. They don't all have to go into full-blown collapse.
right.
Generally, what like we saw with the Soviet Union financially collapsed by
Yep.
1982. It then politically collapsed somewhere in the late 80s, and then it commercially and societally collapsed by the early 1990s when we saw a complete collapse of the Soviet Empire. So generally, you see that situation occur with empires that don't have um, empires that are not flexible enough to make the shift. Now, the Roman Empire, for instance, went through two death rebirth processes, right? And so the first one was the end of the Roman Republic, and that the transition into the empire. The empire apexed and then went through a transformation again where it broke up into two empires, right? Which became eventually the Eastern Roman Empire, which eventually became the Byzantium Empire, and the Western Roman Empire that went on for a few hundred years or another hundred some odd years, and then finally collapsed, right? Which started the official Dark Age. So because it's only when empires or anything doesn't have, you know, when they don't make a transition through a failed transformation, what one of the things that I'm trying to remember exactly who brought this up, but which psychologist will come to me in a moment, said a suicide is a failed transformation. So you could think of a collapse, right? A complete collapse at 5 different levels of a civilization or an empire or a nation state, what have you, or even a company like GE, which is on the verge of right. GE, which was the number one stock in the year 2000, now it's like what $4 stock. It's on the verge of going out of business. That type of thing. it's a failed transformation would imply a death and no rebirth, right, or what, or someone who does some form of self-destructive tendency that leads to suicide, or a massive decline that leads to a premature death. So what we're seeing now is either going to it's going to break us through to a new period in our development as a civilization, as a country, or we're talking Mad Max, right, where everything just goes right. And so I don't believe we're going to get there. So for everyone who's thinking, oh no, this is getting too gloom and doom talk here, I don't believe we're going to go to that level. I do think, though, we haven't seen the end of that financial, political, commercial collapse.
Oh
I
no, not at
believe that's going to run its course.
all. I would be astounded if there wasn't a full-blown recession by February.
You mean
Uh,
depression? We're already in a recession. Maybe not in Long Island, but well, I've heard Long Island's got devastated. I have some clients out there telling me absolutely devastated.
but where we live is Disney World. It's not. It has
Right,
there's no relation to reality in the Hamptons because
right, right,
just
right. You have like Bobby Axelrod's living around you.
we live in the good part where the real workers and the cops and the firemen and all those other people live. So
Right.
yeah. One of the things that I think that the COVID thing happened for was I always said I don't like taking direction from leaders who don't do their own laundry and don't wash a dish and don't know what's going on with the world. And
Right.
a lot of the people who are very powerful were forced to do their own laundry because they couldn't get their maid service because of the COVID-19 thing.
Right.
And people who distracted themselves with travel and sports and going to the theater. Now everybody's like, you got to really focus on who you are. And
Yeah, well,
that
that's part of a transformation, right? Like if you're in an existential crisis that could lead to suicide, right? Or have then one of the things is you have to figure out who you really are, right?
exactly
And that's what's happening to us personally and collectively.
and
And that's
that's
where that debate is going on right now. We have this
yep,
big debate
yeah,
and body politic
that gets
of
me
who are we? Go ahead.
gets me so excited because that's the key. You know, because that's the answer to the question of when are we going back to being normal. We're not.
Never.
We're getting better. I mean, if you're not getting better, what's the point? You know, and then you start to spiral into depression, which is anger turned inwards. You know, I wish things were better. I mean, yes, of course, people want the things to be. You know, you can go to the theater. Though I must say, the last time I went to the theater, they were cramming in the seats so tight I couldn't even like. You know what I mean? Things have gotten a little bit too out of hand, and people needed a challenge. I'm not saying that people dying and all this stuff was a challenge. It's so much beyond that. But now, every day, you're pitted against the reality that you're walking out into. I don't know how it is where you are, but out here, you know, everyone's pretty much wearing a mask when they go to
Mhm.
different. No, but I've never seen one person resist it out here. I've never seen
Mhm.
anyone come in to make a statement. You know, even my friends at the places where you wouldn't think there would be people like that, they're doing it. They're trying to help. Though you got to remember that surgeons wear masks to keep you from getting infected, not to
Right.
keep them from.
Exactly. That's
But
exactly what's going on here, right?
but
So,
100%. But I love when you always post those posts that say it's just the flu, bro.
right. Well, you have to. The reason I do that, and I'm really being sarcastic when I do that in regards to the metaphysical community, there's a good chunk that still that email me or reach out to me and say, William, I really respect your, thinking on a whole bunch of things, but when it comes to this, it's just the flu, bro. And then they'll give me some link to a website or some YouTube, expert that has no real qualifications at all onto why that is. And they're actually tripling down on it. They're not doubling down, they're tripling down, especially when there's an emergence of a second wave now happening in Europe. And we're right. It just started a few days ago, right? And we're going into a flu season on October 1st. That's when the flu season officially starts. So we're just days away from a combination of a second flu season combined with a second wave that started in Europe and is now spreading probably here just in time for the election. And people are saying it's just the flu, bro. Let's open up everything. Let's go back to normal. And you know, as almost as if like what happened in the spring is irrelevant.
Well, there's a lot of people who think that it's a political move and that it's just to skew the election. But I know people who know people who've died. I personally do not know anyone who has died from COVID. And then they'll tell you, well, it's all about the comorbidities. And I always come back to, okay, but still, those people with the comorbidities would be alive today.
Yeah. Well, so like, look at this chart here. This is when the national emergency was declared in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the exact moment for those of you out there taking note on this. This is on March 13th, 11 a.m., decreed by the President of the United States. Yes, he's still got power. He's the most powerful man in the world, despite what Joe Biden says. And if you look at this, you see this Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn quadruple conjunction. Not to mention the fact that Sun Moon midpoint is right on, pretty much on the Mars Jupiter midpoint. All right, so I'm just getting a little technical here. And the fact that the Sun is conjunct Neptune. Neptune rules, right? Neptune would rule like epidemics,
Yep.
and Jupiter Pluto historically, along with Saturn Pluto, is correlated with world large scale global pandemics. So that being said, look where we are today. Let me just go to here now. Right? We have this triple conjunction. We have Mars hitting it off, setting off Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, right? And this is, let's just go to October 1st, right? That's the official beginning of flu season. And let me just drag these guys right up here. Let me just, for the sake of, let me do that right here. Bang. So look
People
at that.
people who follow you know astrology pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
Um,
I see the questions they ask you. Some of them are very interesting.
right. I mean, here's the thing. Look at the Mars. It's hitting off right on October 1st, the beginning of the flu season. I mean, it looks like the second wave is about to land.
Right. No, for sure. And plus, there are people that are relaxing things. Um, and there's so much experimental. I always think that Uranus and Pluto are in the mix there because, as you point out, Uranus is all about freedom and revolution. So there are people that think that this is a power grab. It's trying to subvert people's independence and wearing a
Well,
mask. They call them face diapers, all this kind of stuff.
right, right. Well, both things could be true,
Yeah,
Monty. Both things. I mean, this could be a pandemic. It's real.
yeah.
The virus is real. It's virulent. It has the capacity to kill if there's underlying conditions or it's untreated. However, it could have been planned as a trigger, as a precursor to invoke the necessary instability politically, financially, socially, at all different levels to invoke a global financial and political or geopolitical reset.
Plus, the timing of it is so suspect because Trump had China on the run, and the next thing you know is they send this thing out to out of Wuhan or wherever, and it goes to Italy to the workers in Milan, and it comes to right at Chinese New Year when the whole country travels. And but is China suffering from are the restaurants open in China?
We don't know. You don't hear anything.
Yeah, but they probably are open. I mean, I think they took a hit certainly where they were, but I don't think they took a hit the way the rest of the world has taken a hit. So it could either be coming from them. It could be like you say a pandemic, because look what happened back in the '60s, and I don't. It could be because I was a musician and I was a little stoned, but I don't remember. there was a terrible, terrible a pandemic going on then, and a lot more people died then than
Back
died.
in 1968.
Exactly. You know, the summer of love, the summer of love.
Right.
Everybody high, and meanwhile, people are dying. They didn't lock down one Wendy's. They didn't lock down one White Castle. You know,
Right.
there nothing locked down, and
Right.
we went through it.
Right. Yeah.
So
And yeah, so it could be that what makes this one worse is the fact that they basically go into phase 3 mode, like Florida, which basically opened up everything, all the restaurants, clubs. People don't have to wear masks starting Monday. And the second wave hits, and they decide, you know what? We're not going to go back to lockdown. That's it. We're just going to let this run its course, build a herd community, and hopefully within a month or two, we'll have some type of inoculation or treatment that minimizes the level of fatalities that makes it, just another flu, bro. So maybe there's maybe there's that. That's what this is telling us here, that it's going to come back, but it's going to be a different. It's going to come back. It's going to come back in a different way. There's going to be a recapitulation, but it won't be. It will be a similar theme, but certainly modified in the recapitulation of it.
our conversation of the last 10 minutes is a representative of like a sixth thing about collapse. You know, that book. What's collapsed is knowing who's telling the truth and what's true and about anything. Here we have the information age where you have the accumulated knowledge of the world on your phone, and of course people are using it to look at pictures of kittens and stuff like that. But
Right.
at this,
Right.
you don't know what's true. And talk about fake news. It's there's been a collapse of truth. I don't know where that figured in on the 5 collapses, but there's been a collapse of
But
who do you
well,
trust?
yeah, I mean, like, I think one of the big fake truths, let me see if I can pull this up here. If I got it here. I mean, I think one of the big fake truths is the fact that they're predicting, I mean, you have the news, all these pollsters are just saying that we're going to see a massive Biden landslide on a scale that's going to surpass um, Reagan Carter or Reagan Mondale, and let me just let me just show you what I'm talking about here. Give me a second.
As a
Uh,
counselor, I have to push back on that in the sense that readings for a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that I do readings for that are like Jews in Nazi Germany, and they won't admit to people that they're in their family, let alone a pollster who calls them, that they would be in favor of Trump. So I can't see how a poll could be accurate when you have a large percentage. I think the Pew Foundation did a survey saying 12% or maybe a little less than that wouldn't tell the truth to a pollster. I think it's more like 24%.
yeah,
Wouldn't?
it's much higher, right? They call it the shy Trump voter
Yeah,
effect, and
yeah,
that's what distorted all of the poll numbers back in 2016.
100%. And that's what I keep trying to explain to people who come and talk about the polls. And plus, the polls are skewed anyway.
Right.
When how they, I think your unbiased group that you work with, doing the horrors for all the different counties, you were damn accurate for 2016.
Right. Well, I could tell you right now, for you and all the viewers watching this, what you see, this 5/38/2020 election forecast map, is nowhere close to the map we're going to be presenting on the 28th.
I'm not surprised. I'm when you have so many people afraid, you know, I think if you want to use lawn signs or bumper stickers, no one puts bumper stickers on because they're afraid of getting their car keyed.
Well,
Only in certain areas will people put up lawn signs, you
well,
know.
Monty, like, I'm looking all over the place while I'm driving around Las Vegas, which is supposedly a Democrat town, and I haven't seen one Biden bumper sticker. I see a couple Trump here and there on some trucks and things like that, but I've seen zero Biden. So what is it like out in Long Island?
No one has anything because I think people are afraid to declare for who they are. I mean, I'm a new age author. I love everybody. So
Yeah, but I'm just curious, like, where is the Biden? Because I've been asking all my clients. I said, by the way, if I'm doing a reading for them and they happen to live in Hawaii or Colorado or wherever in the 50 states, I'll ask them, have you seen any Biden bump and stickers? And they go, let me think about it. No, I haven't. That's really interesting. You asked me that. And I
well,
said, well, how could he be winning by the greatest landslide of all time and nobody is posting anything about it?
well, but
Except the astrologers who continually tell us,
right.
remind me.
On your Facebook page the other day, you had a picture of a billboard that was up in Los Angeles. I couldn't believe it
For
because it,
Trump.
well, yeah, it said had enough, vote Republican.
Yeah,
You know,
have you had enough? Vote Republican, right? It was like,
well,
right. And that was a student of mine who sent that. And she said, William, this is very telling because that's what the area she lives in. I was like, whoa,
yeah,
whoa.
well, they're locked crazy in California.
Right, but if that's what's going on in downtown LA, I believe it was in a Hollywood, North Hollywood area, that's a sign. That's just some cracks in the wall.
Yeah, that there was no graffiti on the sign was a sign
No.
itself.
Right.
Yeah. So
So, you
it's been
know,
a crazy time.
right.
Once truth is the first casualty of war. Here, this what's going on.
Right. So, I just think this is what people see every day be getting pushed out. This is what the New York Times sponsors 538, or they're one of the major sponsors. I know the guy who leads the 538 team, he gets paid over $1 million a year. He was completely wrong. I think on most every key battleground state in 2016, I think he was completely wrong on that. And yet he continues, along with 538, the company, continues to be the voice of reason on what's going to happen in 2020.
Well, but like we say, it doesn't really matter who wins or loses. There's going to be a financial reset afterwards anyway.
Yeah, and this financial reset, yes, it will be financial, but it will also be political, and it's also it's going to affect everybody at such a deep level. Even if you are prepared, even if you got your gold, your guns, and your gunpowder all stocked and loaded, it's still going to have very powerful repercussions long term, just like the last reset in the early 1930s when they closed the banks down for 8 days and they reset the value of everything, confiscated your gold, and then that had some very profound implications,
Yes, and
right?
speaking of your gold and your guns, the gun sales and the ammo sales are like 200% higher all over the country. And in the 7 swing states, I just saw an article. I don't know where I saw it, but in the 7 swing states, gun background checks are up 80%.
Right. That's correct. Yeah.
So that's making all those people who are decided that they're going to arm themselves as a way of protecting themselves, they're going to look at politics differently.
Right. Absolutely.
Because they can't say it can't happen here anymore. I mean, didn't you have someone on your website on Facebook talking about their son lives like a block from where all the fires were in Minnesota during one of the riots? So I mean,
Absolutely. Yes.
it's in though the mainstream media is not reporting it, it's in people's faces in a way, and on social media.
Right. Right. So they're not reporting. Again, that's part of the societal collapse. Some people say, "Well, what are you talking about? There's no collapse yet." Well, when the polls are wrong, that's societal collapse, right?
But
When you can't trust the very institutions that you've trusted all your life now, you have to second guess it. That's a form of societal collapse.
yeah,
And people know this is going on. They know they're being played.
yes, and
That's the sad part. You would think they would all rise up and say, "We want the truth on everything.
but how
If
do you?
Trump's really winning, let us know."
But I guess the people who are protesting are rising up. They're doing the old, network thing. I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore.
But
But any,
yeah, I hear what you're saying. But here's that BLM protest is a deep state, privately funded, engineered well coordinated
Oh, definitely.
insurgency. It's not a protest that
No,
wants change. It wants to overthrow the government.
I understand. They had pallets of bricks and they had that U-Haul truck the other day. But I love the Baghdad Bob reporter saying it's a mostly peaceful thing when the whole building remember Baghdad Bob during the Iraq
Right,
War?
right, right,
There's no problem, and the tanks are rolling in behind him.
right. The U.S. tanks are behind, right, in his reporting of his right in the camera screen. Yeah,
The only thing missing was the dragon from Game of Thrones behind him, burning
right,
every.
right. So what I'm saying, what I'm getting at is like, this is all part of the transformation, and so we have to keep that perspective that like I don't know what it's going to take for people, but I think the pitchforks are coming uh as we get closer and closer to the reset, but it's not the BLM. The BLM is a deep state insurgency movement. It's not a protest movement that wants economic equality and open markets. That wants to take down the 1% structure of finance that's been put in place since 2008. Uh, we're looking at a complete. So that's coming, no doubt, and
Yeah,
then we'll talk about it as once we get over this election. But I think this BLM thing, and I think the big issue with the BLM thing, it hasn't started because the day after the election, well, there ain't going to be no day after the election. The election is going to keep going on the 4th, the 5th, the 6th of November, all the way until the 15th. They're
I
going to
mean,
protest. They're going to fight. They're going to reject any ballot number that doesn't conform with a definitive Biden win in any state.
well, that's what the setup of these kind of predictions are. Is see, we had it all locked up, and it's not going to happen again. Yeah, but there's no way around it. Whoever is the president is going to have a lot of trouble. We're just all in for it, where we have to prepare as best we can. Like you say, at a certain point, no matter how much you prepare, it's going to affect everybody. There's no one's going to sit behind a wall and not be affected by this.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, this is where I'm just looking at just different candidates here, and nothing like election day 2020. Let me just put it here. I just put 11 p.m. So around 11 p.m. that is when they closed the ballots in California, and it's really clear to me. You got what the moon. The
Conjunctive.
moon is conjunct a node, making it a separating square with Neptune. And I believe Mercury, if I'm correct, Mercury is about to do what? Is stationing at that time? It's
So
about to go retrograde, correct?
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, it's about to go retrograde. It'll go retrograde that day, right? So retrograde direct, I should say. So what's it? Look, the bottom line is that this election process is not going to end on election eve. It's
No,
going to be a chaotic, tumultuous, historic, histrionic election that's really going to shake the very foundations of our political structure and our society uh, between now until the time that the Electoral College meets on December 16th, that's blocked into the Constitution. So if the Supreme Court's getting involved, and it looks like it will be, it looks like we have to look at that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, which occurs on what, the 11th? Let me just see here.
I don't understand why people who support Joe Biden are against adding a ninth justice, because if it goes to the Supreme Court, they're going to need to have a deciding vote, and 8 and 8's not going to do anybody any good. And people like Kavanaugh and Roberts have not always voted the way you would expect people who support the conservative viewpoint would vote. They voted contrary to that. So I think people should have a little more faith in the process. But as you say, it's breaking down, so people are having less faith in it.
They have less faith in it. So we could see here in this type of scenario where we have the Jupiter Pluto tight conjunction Supreme Court. That's a very powerful signature for the Supreme Court. Conjunct a conservative based Supreme Court. We're going to have the first time since the 50s a conservative based Supreme Court. Look at that. and we're going to see. So it looks like to me around the 12th, 13th is when the Supreme Court gets involved in terms of sorting out the ballots that are coming in. And you have to remember, there's November, how many states? There's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada. And I think right now that's where it stands, where they can people can continue to vote 2 weeks following
Right.
election night. Isn't that insane? 2 weeks, they can just send in their ballot. They'll still be counted. It, I mean, and if they're doing that, if they're allowing that to happen, why don't you just allow it for everyone? Extend election day for 2 weeks. We all can vote over a 2 week period in all 50 states, and then we begin counting.
I know it's like the old Chicago machine politics. Vote early, vote often,
Right. And vote frequently.
alive or dead. But that chart is pretty astounding. And the chart you had for election day that was a Leo rising. I mean, Trump is a Leo rising with Mars on
Right.
his.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to that in a second. But so let's see, election day, and with the Leo rising,
Yeah,
and the moon is in his sign, right? Isn't that like a good thing? If the
yeah,
moon is in your own sign on an important date,
yeah. I mean, yes, as an astrologer.
right? So
Well, people who know astrology. That's why I'm always surprised you get pushback because when you look at Trump's chart with Mars on his ascendant, people are like, well, he's a draft dodger, he's this and that. When you have Mars on your ascendant, you like to fight, whether you've been in the army or not.
right,
And I tell him, I said, if you really want to stop him, stop fighting with him because that feeds him. You
right.
call it Godzilla. It's true.
Trumpzilla, yeah, right. Because when does Godzilla get stronger? The more, the bigger the monster, the more powerful, right?
Exactly.
The more you hit Godzilla, the stronger he gets, right?
The
That's his superpower.
death ray is like vitamins to him.
Right. Exactly. So, and it's just like Godzilla, the more they hit Trump, the stronger he comes back.
Well, they don't
Look what
get.
they did. They
That's
tried to take him down twice, impeach him twice. It failed.
I understand why people get mad at him, and
Right.
I don't. I had a friend, a Jewish friend of mine, who studied anti-Semitism, and he went to a class, and the rabbi said the definition of anti-Semitism is when you hate Jews too much. And I think you know, that's what they hate Trump too much, to the point where if he's done some good things, they can't even admit that he's helped
Right.
things about trafficking of human beings and done some. They won't admit anything. If he was able to produce gold, they'd say, "Oh, you see that he's keeping other people from producing gold."
Right. He could walk on water and raise the dead, and it still wouldn't be enough, right? To uh,
It's, it's a
ref-
total.
yeah. So look, I mean, definitely like Godzilla, he's an ambivalent figure in you could see that he's both it's interesting, he's like a good guy, like he's a good he's considered a god, but like he is Godzilla bad or good? And it depends. You could say, well, he destroys these buildings, but ultimately he defeats the monster or the enemy, or depending on, right. He basically restores order on the planet. When, right, humanity or something else falls out of order, right, when there's a complete displacement going on, he emerges, right, and brings it back into order, and then recedes back into the sea. I mean, that's the classic, archetype,
The mythology of Godzilla.
right? The mythology of Godzilla, yeah. So you could see that Trump is sort of like a result of the whole body politic of the United States. And well, we could say this about Britain and other nations as well, has gotten into such a corrupted, dysfunctional, malefic state that something needed to come up to restore order to it. To
Yes.
restore some type of balance. And that process tends to be very messy.
Well, that's why nationalism is on the rise. Is when people feel powerless, they start looking for a powerful person that they can get behind. I think that's unfortunately why you see all these, like you say,
Right.
funded rioting and all this other stuff. Is people want to feel part of something, so they don't feel like they're part of nothing.
Right. You know, I'll tell you the truth. If someone asks, when I look at this conjunction here, and I say to myself, okay, well, Trump's a pretty powerful, formidable individual, both, not just because he's president, but also in the secular world as well, because of his wealth and his power and his history. I mean, he's been a very powerful force on the cultural, at least in the American cultural landscape, for a good time, for a good period of time. And I look at that, and then I say to myself, okay, does Bernie Sanders personify that level of power? Yes or no?
Well, he doesn't, but he gives that power to other people.
Right. So, but I'm saying, like, in terms of we're trying to win an election here, like, yes, we do know there's deep state operatives that give him his injection and feed him his lines and give him the right answer in his little micro earpiece. And
Because you
right.
made,
But
okay, I'm sorry. I
yeah,
misunderstood.
no. I was just saying, like, so when I look at Trump, and we call him Trumpzilla, the way he sort of like pushes things through and he overrides and he uses the nuclear option in the Senate, you know, like, like that's like a last resort. That's his first resort, and actually galvanizes his base. That definitely symbolically represents what we're seeing here, right? For election day, he seems to personify that very well.
Yes.
But Biden, does Biden Harris, or should I say Harris Biden, personify that?
No, not really. I'm not. When you're talking Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, I mean, there's Jupiter, the actor, the positive, the politician. Pluto, the destroyer, who
Mm-hmm.
represents the ability to, in mythology, to say you go to heaven, you go to hell, you go to, that
Right,
kind of powerful decision making. And Saturn, which represents structure and authority.
right, right.
I mean, I don't want to take sides in the election, but if you're asking who does that personify, it personifies, as you call him, Trumpzilla.
Right, absolutely. Now, if she was running, let me just get this from the current slide. Hold on a second. Now, sort of, I had her all. Let me. If current slide, if she was running, if AOC was running against Trump, she personifies more of the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, right? She personifies it very well when she's calling out people to radicalize and fight following the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Let this moment radicalize you, she said. Let this moment really put everything into stark focus, because this election has always been about the fight of and for our lives. So I need you to be ready. That's very Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. Get out there,
Oh,
right?
it
And
is, but
fight.
I would think it was in the sign of Sag rather than Capricorn, the way she is, because sometimes she
Well,
said work against herself.
Well, the Supreme Court definitely is Jupiter Pluto. You know what I'm trying to say? The ability to, when it's supreme, when the court of it's in Capricorn, the court of the highest land, right? Gets pushed down, and the promulgation of law and order gets pushed down from the judicial system. And she's calling it this call to action. It's called this political call to action. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is really, she's really personifying the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto as well on the radical left, as well as Trump is on what you want to call, if you want to call the alt right, right? You could see on, however, she's not old enough to run.
No, not yet. But when she's talking, I mean, there are people that can interpret what she's saying here as sedition, or she's trying to incite riots.
Well, wouldn't that be Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Trying to incite, yeah.
Yeah.
So you could see one end of it, right, with her and the sedition and the BLM and backing that in total coalition, and then you could see Trump being the alt right, right, pushing what he's, And so what I'm getting at is, like, there's two different flavors of the same archetypal aspect, the archetypal alignment, right?
Well, I don't like it when they walk so close to the ethnic cleansing, when they say things about Republicans, that
Right,
vote for him, that
right, right,
that's taking it a bridge too
right,
far, in my opinion.
right. You know what I think? I think that this election's about AOC coming to power, and I think this is about Donald Trump's reelection. So it's about the reelection of Trump and the rise of AOC. looking at it purely from astrology, just looking at it saying, okay, right? Because who has the two biggest followings in Twitter that dwarfs anyone, any movie star? Take a guess.
Oh, I knew it. I knew it. Oh my God, I feel like I'm on a quiz show. I
Well,
did.
you already
What?
know the first answer.
Well, Trump has what, 83 million.
He has the number one. He's number one, right? Guess who's closing in?
AOC.
AOC. I'm telling you, she's the rising, right? She's Trumpzilla's rival. She's the. I'm trying to think of, like, you have Godzilla versus Kong, Godzilla versus Mothra, Godzilla versus, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Who
What
wrote
I'm
it?
getting at is her numbers. When I look at Google Analytics, when I look at Twitter followers, she keeps growing. So does Trump. Trump's not declining. Trump's rising still. But what I'm saying is the galvanization of the radical, social, radical extreme left versus, this centrist or alt-right in the body politic of America. And they both personify this. So to me, Biden Harris, so I should say, sorry, I meant to say Harris, the real candidate,
Yeah.
Biden to get her in, doesn't seem to connect at all with this Jupiter Saturn Pluto conjunction. That's really what I was getting at.
Do you get any props from the astrology community? Because you called Harris as the nominee way back before when
Yep.
they had 16 different Democratic people running, as I recall.
Well, I was on Coast to Coast in January 2019, and I said to George Nori, the two charts that you have to watch for is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, particularly Kamala Harris. I said, long term, Harris, should she be the nominee or the vice president, has the most presidential transits, let's say,
Yeah.
right? So I believe the body politic who's voting for Biden is really voting for Harris, but doesn't want to admit it. And especially the astrologers who predict a Biden landslide. By and large, most astrologers, as you know, predict a massive landslide for Biden. But they're
But
really saying that because of Harris.
but
Harris's horoscope.
she didn't even get 3% in the primary.
Right. Well, that's why she's a deep state agent. They tried to get her through the one way. They couldn't. They're going to do it this way, and they're going to try and cheat because they know they're losing. They know they're losing in the Midwest. They are not gaining traction right now in the Midwest states. They hit a certain impasse, right? They hit that, what do they call that, resistance zone, and now Trump is pushing through that, and the momentum is on Trump's side. So they're going to get more desperate. They're going to do everything in their power to disrupt the election between now and November, especially if Biden. Okay, I'm going to ask you your prediction first. What do you think is going to happen when Biden debates Trump?
Oh, I can't see how if people might feel sorry for him because I mean, Trump is a hard person to debate against. He knows his stuff. I mean,
He's a
look at
Gemini.
Gemini with Mars on the ascendant, Leo rising. He is a showman. He loves all this stuff. But nobody likes to see someone pummel somebody. My my prediction astrologically is he's going to roll over him. I
Right,
mean,
he's going to roll over him, right? Because we look, here's Joe Biden's chart here, and here is the transits, right? Here's the transits on the day of the debate, and you could see what I note here is the fact that you see this triple conjunction
look at
making a direct opposition to Biden's Jupiter.
look at Neptune transiting his fourth house cusp. He stays home all the
He stays home, right, with a
time.
mask on,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
be on
yeah,
his
so
fourth house cusp. I mean, he's like sick at home.
right, so it's interesting. It's like you see Neptune there, and you don't see anything that shows, hey, you're about to become president. There's nothing astrologically that's compelling. In fact, the fact that I'm sure you just heard that Hunter Biden, the Senate Intelligence Committee, is going to release a in-depth paper that's going to go to the justice for full-blown legal investigation on his sex trafficking, bribes for political favors, all under when his father was vice president, being flown on Air Force Two, and but it goes deeper than just what happened in Ukraine. There's a connection between Moscow, the Ukraine, and China simultaneously.
I know that, but the people, you talk about cognitive dissonance. This is a cognitive dissonance like Big Ben in the Houses of Parliament.
Right.
Because the people that look at that and say, oh, it's the Republicans who did it, therefore it's a lie.
Now, I would normally say, yeah, not much, that story's not going to get traction. But here's the thing. Look at that triple conjunction: international intrigue, international conspiracy, making a direct opposition to Biden's Jupiter in his 8th house. What's the 8th house? I get money under the table from hidden sources.
Yeah, but that might actually, not be good for him. I mean, I don't like to say.
No, I'm just saying that I believe this Biden story is going to get more traction than most anybody anticipates. So most people keep telling me, William, it's all true, William, but nothing is going to happen to Biden. Well, you know what? I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing this Hunter Biden story biting into him a lot deeper in terms of affecting undecided voters, and not in California, not in New York. They don't count. When I look at it, Pennsylvania, Michigan, especially Wisconsin, those states where all the outsourcing went to, they care what Hunter Biden did.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't want to get into the prediction of what you asked me, but I did make a prediction today, and I don't usually do predictions. Sure. Usually my only prediction is it's going to be as bad as it was, except worse. But my prediction, I have to attribute that. That's Michael Luton, who's very funny.
Right. He is.
But I did predict, because of the everything slowing down, going stationary direct, and a whole bunch of other stuff with Mars and Chiron, that there is going to be secrets revealed that even the most diehard, brainwashed, echo chamber dweller is going to look at and go, oh man, I can't, oh God, oh no, really? I think there is going to be something that is actually going to break through the cognitive dissonance, but it's going to make people nuts, because I can admit when I'm wrong. A lot of people can't admit when they're wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that's look what happened. You had the Mueller investigation, you had all this other stuff, the dossier, it hasn't done anything.
Well, because it was all fraudulent and false, and that's part of what the Durham investigation is now exposing, along with the Clinton Foundation, as you know, is under direct investigation.
But there are people that still think that even that isn't real, because it's the Republicans.
And I don't, here's the thing, Monte. That's the thing. What people say, okay, but I look at the fact that, wait a minute, Jupiter, Pluto, Clinton Foundation, bribes for political favors, international intrigue, international money funneling that goes direct to the White House, blah blah blah, the whole list, right? That's responsible for changing policy that results in outsourcing jobs and industries, specific jobs and industries, to China, to empower China for its eventual global hegemony that it's planning to implement and roll out by 2025, that the Clintons in particular were, even during the Obama administration, were rolling out, were operating and using the sex trafficking through Jeffrey Epstein and Giselle Maxwell, that operation, in order to compromise political candidates, to make them do their bidding with control files, right? All of that is all connected. And Jupiter Pluto is conjuncting on the 12th, or it's getting there. It doesn't even have to conjunct on that. I mean, it's so close. And now all this is coming up. And I would say, wait a minute here. As an astrologer, everyone says nothing's going to come of it, William. Trust me, I know better than you. I know you're 55 and you've been around, but I know better. Nothing's going to happen. And I say as an astrologer, oh, no. This is finally going to hit somehow or other. I don't know how. It's going to hit mainstream in a very powerful way in the coming weeks or days, maybe even hours. That's what I think.
I think it's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, because I said I'd be either apologizing or taking a victory lap by the blue moon on October, on Halloween.
Right.
I think by Halloween it'll definitely happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this Halloween, right? I mean, by Halloween, we often know who's pretty much going to win. I think that is the day of the first debate, which we're looking at here in Biden's chart. The day of the first debate is going to be when the Trump administration, or should I say, the Trump um, when the investigation gets released, the documents, the paperwork, the everything, it all gets released. It all goes through formal channels on the internet. It's going to be undeniable the level of corruption and international intrigue and high treason that was committed by the Clinton Foundation, by the Obama administration, while Joe Biden was vice president. I think it's going back to that period in 2014 in particular.
It could definitely well be, but astrology works for everybody, so it could also be some stuff about Trump will come out too, and they'll probably some people will use that as a counter to I mean, there's some people that you just can't
Right,
convince.
right. But what else could come out about Trump that's going to stick?
Well, that's true.
Oh, come on. I mean, they've used everything in their arsenal.
My favorite, though, is Governor Cuomo of New York telling he can't come to New York unless he has an army. Well, guess what? He has an army. The United States Army. He's the
Yeah.
commander.
Yeah. No, I mean, that might be stuff that comes out on Trump. They're certainly trying to push through some type of, I think he has some suit right now where, look, go ahead.
No, I just thought someone said something I saw on the internet about he raped somebody. I mean, I don't know.
We've heard that how many times?
I know.
Like how many women?
I know. It's just, I wish everybody would calm down and get into their spiritual center.
Right. Well, yeah. So what I'm getting at is that what we're seeing is a spiritual war, a political war, a social war, a culture war, right? Power to the people war. The middle class war.
Well, I just don't want to see the last two collapse things that you posted happen. I want.
Right.
I think a lot of good can come out of this. I don't want to sound like a rainbow farting new age author, which is what.
Well, like I said, collapse is not assured, right? Just because Russia went through it, there's many instances in history where collapse was not final. It was near collapse scenarios, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't see a full collapse. And I think there's enough resiliency in the country. I think we're too young as a country or empire. However, I mean, I think the U.S. is really an empire that's in denial, or at least the body politics in denial of that. But I think it's too young. We're still too early in this.
And plus, the United States was founded on the principle of individuality and freedom. So
Right.
it's not like we're, Russia, which was a total Soviet state.
Totalitarian, yeah. Socialist state, yeah.
Or even, what was going on in Bosnia and Serbia,
Right.
which were coming out of communist rule. Here in the United States, we have the Second Amendment. We have everyone uses technology. There's a lot of, the thing I'm trying to avoid at all costs is saying, which I'm sure this must drive you crazier than anything, is when people look at you and say, yeah, but this time it's going to be different.
Well, I've been hearing that for the past 2 years. William, you don't know it's going to be different. Oh, the stock market's down 40% and we have negative GDP 32%. Didn't I talk about that last year? But yeah, William, that's true. But this time it's going to be different.
I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible because we haven't touched on the liquidity of the overnight repo market, which talk about a canary in the coal mine. Right. I mean, that's like the condor in the coal mine, flapping its wings.
Right.
But there are differences in this paradigm shift.
Right.
Than, and let's say when Kublai Khan ascended the throne of the Emperor of China, and said, guess what, everybody, today you were Confucians yesterday, today you're a Buddhist, and if you're not a Buddhist, we'll kill you. So it's not going to be like that this time, because now we have TikTok and God knows what and all this other
Right,
stuff.
right. But I think what we're getting at, and I just put this up here because I think unprecedented shock waves of crisis, which we're in now, and more shock waves are coming, make people more receptive to bigger visions of change. Right. And I think that's the metaphysical lesson that we
Yeah.
need to embrace. That maybe our vision, even yours and mine, is still not big enough for the level of change that is going to take place.
Well, you're gonna enter the promised land, and I might not enter with you. An age, but I think it's true. It's like that
Are you
old
going to
joke.
be Moses, where he's not allowed to enter the promised land? Like he can see it from a distance, but he's not allowed to enter.
Um, but
You
it's
remember,
like
that story?
about the joke about how to get an elephant to move, and
Right,
the joke is basically first you got to get their attention. So you're
right,
saying the shockwaves of crisis.
right.
Yeah, sometimes it takes that kind of unfortunate thing to make people realize there's another way to be.
Yeah, and knowing what to expect can provide you a level of peace of mind, even in the midst of a collapse scenario, right?
Oh yeah,
Where especially if you realize, well, what's happening is we have a death rebirth. The baby and the mother go into a death spiral, and especially the baby. Even 1 out of 200 mothers have cardiac arrest,
you
right?
know.
Today, that's not a big deal. And 1 out of, I don't know what the number of children die during childbirth, even in 2020, even in the United States, there's 700 out of how many millions that are born die in childbirth, even with today's technology. So it is a death rebirth that it's occurring simultaneously.
Wow, that just shut me right up.
Well, no. Meaning that if we have that perspective, right, this higher perspective, that even in the chaos,
No, no,
we
it's
can have
just
peace of mind that there's a birth struggling to take place or is taking place.
the reason it shut me up is it's so profound. The minute you talk about a woman giving birth, I mean, there's nothing more magical and mystical
Right.
and powerful. Amy
Right.
posted for a portrait by Audrey Flack. She's having a show with Audrey Flack in Southampton this
Right.
month, and she posed for a picture that Audrey did, and it says there's a picture of Amy dressed as a goddess holding the earth, and it says it's up to the women. I think it's up to the women because they know life and death, and we men
Right.
have a lot of theories, but when it comes down to it, they hold the key of life and death.
Well, that's their superpower, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, well, look, it's gonna, I think that, I think it's gonna be where we're gonna see reversals of polarities at all different levels. We're seeing that now. And I just think it really, comes down to like the shock waves that we've been going through are just helping us be more open or forcing us or coercing us to be open to a bigger vision of change than we we want to accept or embrace or agree to.
Well, the worst sin is ignoring reality. So
Right.
because reality
Well,
has a way of sneaking up on you.
right, right.
Really?
So, I think that if we know that look, these 5 stages of collapse, some of them are guaranteed to happen, some of them are not. We're going through a large process now. I really do think that ultimately, uh, we're really, the metaphysics. This is where metaphysics really trumps everything else.
Yeah.
No pun intended. So,
This is
you
a
know,
chart. This is a chart for Biden again, right?
yeah, this is chart for Biden. This is the great Joe Biden. The You could see, look at him. He's got all these planets in the 12th house. And he's a
But
Scorpio. I mean,
com-
how could you not say there's no connection with deep state
right,
or
and he's comfortable hiding with all that 12th house stuff.
in his basement, 12th house or attic or secret. So I guess we'll wrap it up. I mean, we covered a lot of ground today, but I think it was good. We did that today because there's we're just, this crisis is just getting started. We're like in phase two. Phase one was in
Uh,
March. Now
the,
we're in
the
phase
drill
two.
sergeant has returned. It, yeah, and it's true. We are just getting started, but we've also, one of the things that when you speak and post about how people are driving you nuts, they don't realize how often and how much you are giving them, how many tools you're giving them to deal with all this stuff. You're not just trying to scare the pants off them, which you do, but you're basically saying be brave, be strong, be prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to, with you, like along with you, trying to help them have a vision that is big enough and has the level of depth and perspective that will help them be open to the level of change that we're all being moved to.
Yes, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
I just think the only difference between many and many of the astrologers out there is they want to sugarcoat it. And I think that is, that's a whole nother show in itself, right?
Well, I mean, Amy and I are trying to just inspire people because once you know the truth, you need to be inspired to get through it all.
Right. But you got to look at the upside. It hasn't been that bad, right? It's not like we've lost 1 billion people on the planet and we are in a catastrophic depression and the monetary system is completely collapsed and we
Getting
have
into
marauding hordes
Now you're getting
or,
into my
or
formations theory, which is that there are probable futures implied in every moment. And there have been in a lot of moments we could have gone into a future. I mean, us right here now are in this one, as you were saying, it's not as bad as it could have been. There could have been a future that was really awful. So people can affect the future.
they can affect the future, but I think the most important thing, especially what I advise people who are in crisis, who are in existential crisis, especially ones who are getting hit with that triple conjunction, especially the Capricorns right now, is the first thing you need to do is to radically reframe and reconfigure your vision of who you are and where you are going so that the future you're trying to create for yourself is much more compelling than the future that you had prior, or your sense of future prior to the onset of this crisis.
Right. Good advice. My Mercury is right where all the Capricorn mashup is going on right now. And we've reframed everything to try and establish a foundation that informs a museum that keeps all our work going for as long as it can go. So it got transpersonal, which is what Pluto is all about, is getting
Right.
beyond yourself. So I think if people will get beyond, that's part of the message. And there's another show right there, Getting Beyond Yourself.
Well, I think maybe we'll make that our second show, or we'll certainly make it a show in the forthcoming months as this unfolds. But
Election,
what?
election night wrap up.
Election night wrap up. Yeah, well, that would, but that might take place December 16th because,
And here's
right,
the night wrap up.
right.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're like in the maelstrom. We're in the eye of the storm, and all our navigation devices are failing. Our compass is spinning, and even with our ability to look at the astrology, we have to still be open to the impossible or the highly improbable, at least. Right?
Magic.
We have That's right. That's where magic, divination comes in, ritual comes in, prayer comes in, meditation comes in. They become the key, they became our key tools, our most powerful tools to help us navigate through this period.
They've been very, very good to me.
I know that. I know that. So maybe next time we'll certainly I'll have a lot to talk about but if you know, we do this certainly around when we get close to Halloween, it'll be very interesting to talk about where we left off in terms of how, because Halloween's a time of where the veil thins, right? And we could talk about divination. I like to talk a lot more about how divination can play a bigger role during transformative times.
I would love that more than anything. That would be a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up, folks. I hope you enjoyed our little exchange here. We certainly tried to cover all the bases. I'm sure there's certain things we missed, but we tried to cover it all and keep you informed. And hopefully, we look forward to your feedback and commentary. So we want to end it here. Monte, you want to say goodbye?
I'd just like to thank everybody for staying with us. I saw we had quite a crowd, and a lot of them stayed, most of them. So that's great.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much
All
for
right,
having
everybody.
me. I really
Oh,
appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm just so glad to see you thriving. You deserve it.
and likewise, Monte.
Thank
Likewise. Okay. All right, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care.